Hello guys and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the ugly truth of eating disorders. And I'm pretty sure many of you know a few of the things I will talk about already. But we're going to talk about all the ugly things that many people are too ashamed of. So let's start. A very common misconception is that people who suffer from an eating disorder don't think about food, which is certainly not true. When I was in the depth of my eating disorder, I couldn't think about anything else. I thought about what to eat, what not to eat, when to eat, how much to move, and about calories. The grocery shopping was the highlight of my day when I finally got all my steps in and allowed myself to eat. But I was still very ashamed of eating, even though I ate very little. I was ashamed of eating in front of other people, which is why I isolated myself even more. I also couldn't really concentrate a lot because I simply didn't have enough energy. For other people, it might be the shame of purging, the shame of having a binge, or the shame of certain other things they do to suppress their hunger. So eating disorders go along with a lot of shame. And another very common thing is that people with eating disorders are just not afraid of what they are doing to their bodies. So, of course, we know that it's bad to starve ourselves or to move so much that our body literally falls apart. Or people also know that it's bad to throw up, but they just don't care. And many people with eating disorders also don't care that all the hunger suppressing methods they are using are very bad for their bodies. They might be ashamed of them, but they don't care that it's bad for their bodies. Whether it is consuming lots of coffee with sweetener, whether it is smoking, or whether it is eating uneatable things just to suppress their hunger. They might be ashamed of it. The eating disorder is so much more important than the fear of what they are doing to their bodies that it will always win. Let's talk about some of the physical consequences nobody really loves to talk about. As you guys know, I never had bulimia, but I know a lot of people who did, and so we're gonna start with this topic. Throwing up your meals can cause a lot of damage to your heart, to your body, to your teeth, to your throat, because you're basically throwing up acid, which will burn away your throat, which will burn away teeth. I know a lot of people who had to get new teeth actually because they were so damaged, but damaged teeth are also something that happens in anorexia a lot. I lost one tooth to anorexia and a couple of other teeth broke actually. Fortunately, I was in Germany where healthcare is not as expensive as here. It still cost me like $3,000. The reasons why teeth break is the same reason why also bones break. People who don't eat enough a prolonged period of time, a very, very bad bone density. At a certain point, my bone density was the bone density of an 80-year-old woman when I was just 23 years old. And I know when I talk about these things, I might sound a little bit unemotional, which I'm clearly not. I just really want to point out how dangerous eating disorders are. I also remember one morning when I brushed my hair and I picked up like a bunch of hair. I lost so much hair, which is also because of the low caloric intake I had. So when you don't eat enough, your body basically shuts down all the functions that it doesn't necessarily need to survive, which is why many women also lose their periods. I lost my period very, very quickly, and I was basically a little bit proud of it because it showed me that I was eating little enough to like lose my period, which is a very, very sick thought. Speaking of hair, something I didn't experience, but I know a lot of people who did, is like growing body hair. And I know that I just said that the body will shut down all the functions that are not necessary to survive, which is why we're losing our hair on the head. But at the same time, if you're eating too little over a certain amount of time, your body is constantly cold, which is why it grows body hair in order to keep you warmer. Kind of like a fur, like an animal. Under-eating also goes hand in hand with muscle loss. I lost muscle very quickly, and losing muscle doesn't just mean that you don't look jacked anymore. It actually means that all your organs, which are basically muscles, your heart is a muscle, your bladder is a muscle, all your organs will lose muscles too, which can lead to incontinence. A lot of people who are constantly under eating have a harder time holding their pee basically, which is something many people are very ashamed of, but it's just the ugly truth. I also remember that I basically couldn't drive my mom's VW bus because it didn't have any power steering. I mean, I did, but I had such a hard time turning the wheel because I was so weak because there was no muscle left in my body. When I would finally allow myself to eat at night, I felt so greedy because I would like chug down salad, veggies, and all the things I like prepared for myself. It was basically like a feast every night with like a certain amount of calories that I would allow myself to eat. And I was so ashamed of eating overall, but also ashamed of how fast I would eat the food I would allow myself, which is basically like just a very simple reaction of your body to make sure you like finally get in some calories to survive. But my eating disordered me was so ashamed of it that I would actually just do it on my own. When we don't eat enough, our bodies cannot provide for a child, which is, how I mentioned earlier, why many women lose their periods. This is also the reason for the very low sex drive many people with eating disorders have, because you basically don't have the energy to do anything. So why would you make a baby that you can't even provide for? Of course, hormones also play a big role in this. Hormones getting out of whack with eating disorders. Many people with eating disorders also experience OCD-like behaviors, which can be excessive cleaning, hoarding, counting, whatever it is. Also, many people have certain eating behaviors. For instance, they always have to eat from the same dish, or they cut everything into very little pieces, which, you guess it, again leads to shame. I was getting like super weird about money. Like I literally had such a hard time to spend €2, which led to the point that I actually wasn't tipping, which when I look back at it now, makes me feel very guilty and is not a very nice thing. But I was like, oh, I'm already spending $2 on a coffee, which I could have had cheaper at home, so I'm not gonna tip the person. This is not me, but at this time it was like the eating disorder and the OCD that basically took over. Some people, especially people with bulimia or binge eating, the eating disorder can also lead to stealing. Because if you consume a big amount of food and then like getting rid of it again, this can be very costly. So I know a lot of people who actually started stealing just in order to quote unquote feed their eating disorders. And of course, this is a behavior that is driven by the eating disorder. So I completely understand the shame, but I don't think we should shame people like this. Another thing people with eating disorders often do is like licking their plates clean. Whether it is binge eating disorder, whether it is bulimia where you like eat everything and then throw up afterwards, or whether it's anorexia and you like weighed your food before and allowed your food that, you don't want to leave anything on the plate. You lick your plate clean and you make sure nobody else takes anything from your plate. And of course, for some people with eating disorder, the body changes. That can be water retention due to purging, that can be gaining weight because of binging, or losing weight because you don't eat enough. This also can lead to a lot of shame, especially when it comes to clothes shopping. Some people actually have to go to the children's section of a store, which for some people is a win and for others it's actually very embarrassing. So as you can see, there are so many things that come with an eating disorder, and this was just like a little part of all the things I could talk about. And again, I'm really not trying to glorifying anything here. I also don't want to shame anyone because I've been through that on my own. But I also want to share the ugly truth without glorifying anything. Just now that I'm recovered and looking back, I can still understand why I did the things I did, but I also would never do them again. I learned to take care of my body, learned to take care of my health, and I learned to take care of my relationships. These are all things that are possible with recovery. And I know it is hard and I know it's a long process, but my account is here to help you guys. So if you have any questions as to the topic or anything else recovery related, leave a comment. I'm here for you and I'm very happy to cover all your questions. I really hope to see you in the next one and I hope you liked that video.